and welcome to today's session. It's great to be with you tonight. And to introduce myself once again, my name is Sam and I am the content lead for Twinkl NewsRoom. Twinkl NewsRoom provides child-friendly current affairs content for children in Key Stage 2. So that's ages 7 to 11. If you're not familiar with the English, with like key stages in England. And in today's session, I'm going to be focusing on how you can integrate current affairs into your curriculum, and I'll be focusing primarily on oracy, reading, and how we can get critical thinking across the curriculum. So to start off with, I thought I'd ask with a bit of a question. You don't need to put just rather for us to reflect rather than reflect internally rather than write anything down. And it's, if a child asked you about something they had heard in the news, would you pause your lesson and make time to answer it, or would you press on with your timetable? I think there's a lot to unpack with that question. It certainly takes me back to, because before I worked for Twinkl, I was a teacher, it certainly takes me back to a few instances I can think of from my own experience in the classroom. I hope today's presentation will reassure you that it is possible to talk about the news and give you some ideas of how you can do that, of how you can do that. But I acknowledge it is it is a difficult thing to do. So to start off with, I'd like to focus on the why. So, why should we talk about things in the news? Teachers' days are already crammed. We know that from surveys completed by teachers on workload. So why do we need another thing adding on? Well, it's something that has cropped up and is now mentioned a lot, but has been mentioned recently by educators as a way of how the curriculum could meet the challenges of the future. The National Literacy Trust, in collaboration with a parliamentary committee of MPs, published in 2018 their Fake News and Critical Literacy report. And in it they said that the new digital media landscape can be bewildering and overwhelming even for experienced adult media consumers. It is even more so for children and young people. So this points again to the need for children to develop that critical thinking. The second quote comes from Andreas Schleicher, who is the director for the Directorate of Education and Skills, the OECD. I realised that job title is quite a mouthful, but the OECD publish research comparing education systems, most notably the PISA studies. And he said that distinguishing between what is true and what is not is a critical skill today. Now, while he doesn't mention current affairs explicitly, again leads to the need for children to have time to discuss, debate, and listen to other points of view before coming to a conclusion. The Mental Health Foundation say that a news blackout is rarely helpful, and instead they argue about sharing the facts with children and finding the right balance. Now, while I'm here today as an advocate for Twinkl NewsRoom, there are good quality child-friendly news sites such as BBC Newsroom here in the UK that can help us achieve that balance. And they also mention, the blog also goes on to mention things about leaving time for discussion, making children feel reassured that they are safe, and also being confident if you don't know the answer to a question, saying that you'll go and find out for them, find the answer for them and come back. I've included a link to the blog, and it's something that you may want to on this presentation and in the sheet that accompanies it with links, and I've included the link there for you to have a look at. Next is like a quote from a report in Ofcom that teenagers in the UK are turning away from traditional news channels and are instead looking to Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube to keep up to date. Now, while I don't want to paint social media as a complete no-go zone, however, the finding does highlight the need for children to have the skills to gain information from a variety of sources and able to think through that, and have the ability to think through that critically. And finally, I've got a quote from the the curriculum and assessment review. It says our renewed curriculum built on a foundation of high and rising standards, greater access to cultural learning, and crucial work and life skills will set up all our children to achieve and thrive in the workplace of the future and throughout their lives. So this definitely points to, we know that oracy is likely to play a huge role in the new curriculum, and there's skills, there's life skills that are mentioned in the quote, around conversation that lead to there's a role that current affairs can play in that. So I acknowledge that some of the quotes I've shared may be a little bleak. However, there are a host of other reasons for why we at Twinkl Newsroom believe you should talk about current affairs. First up, we think it will develop critical thinking, getting children to think about the information they're reading. There's a chance to practice oracy, allowing children to express their opinions in response to an open-ended question, and also practicing active listening, taking on, challenging, hearing the opinions of their peers. Greater exposure to different types of genres, like this child-friendly news article in the image here, helps develop reading stamina through giving children more choice, and the more engagement they are, the more they're likely to read, which is things that we know well. And also we believe that child-friendly news can help provide children with an opportunity for active citizenship, and help them, give them some agency. So we always include tasks in our weekly packs that help children to find out more and take action on an issue. And finally, we believe that talking about the news helps offer reassurance. We understand that there are huge issues affecting the world, but we also like to share examples of how people are taking action to meet those challenges. So that's a bit of a section on why you should talk about the news. The next part I'd like to move on to and discuss more within the curriculum is spoken language. And I've outlined some objectives from the national curriculum that focus on how current affairs can help you meet certain objectives. So it says here that children should learn to ask relevant questions to extend their understanding and knowledge. They should learn to articulate and justify answers, arguments, and opinions, and consider and evaluate different viewpoints, attending to and building on the contribution of others. Last month, the report of the Commissioners on the Future of Oracy Education in England released their report, in which they said, alongside reading, writing, and arithmetic, oracy is the fourth R. And there's been this renewed focus. The new Labour government have spoken in opposition about oracy being something they'd like to bring forward, and other influential educational education think tanks, such as the Sutton Trust, have also said that the new curriculum should ensure state school students at all ability levels have the opportunity to develop their oracy skills. So how might this, and then further on, another stat is that 68% of business leaders agree that the growth of technology and AI will make spoken language and listening skills more important for progression at work. So it seems that current affairs can play a role in helping children develop and practice their oracy skills. And you might want to use a question related to the news as a way for children to orally rehearse their writing before putting pen to paper, for want of a better phrase. So it could be preparation for writing balanced arguments or persuasive writing. Debate clubs, so another interesting feature. I acknowledge that these are very much, the stats from groups such as the Sutton Trust suggest that these are more prevalent in private schools than in state schools. However, this quote from the Oracy Commission says that speech and debate provide opportunities for students to develop critical thinking and reasoning skills that are of benefit across all curricular learning and to active citizenship both at school and in later life. So while debate clubs might not be a feature now, it might be something with the renewed focus on oracy that begins to appear more often in schools. And what better way, and talking about the news, including it in your curriculum, it's a great way of exploring the relevance of a topic. So say if there was a new mission to Mars and the Artemis mission is in the news, it's a great way of showing how people are talking about it, is relevant, and helps give children a purpose for their learning. And also ideas I put down here for developing philosophy with children, that deeper thinking, and you might want to use the news as part of a class assembly where children get the opportunity to discuss and give their opinion on a question. So how might this look? Well, I've included this image here. I don't know if anyone knows the name of the little pygmy hippo that's getting its chin scratched here. You may have heard of her. This is Mudeng, who is as I say, a pygmy hippo, and she lives in Thailand, and she's been making the news recently because her image was shared on social media, and she became a social media phenomenon. And this increase in interest in Mudeng led to lots of people coming to the zoo where she lives, and unfortunately some people were very respectful, but others weren't, and ended up kind of causing a bit of a disturbance within her pen. And this led us to broaden the question: should we keep animals in zoos? Should we keep animals in zoos? So using the story of Mudeng to ask a bigger question that might be relevant to children. Now, Newsroom produces weekly packs that explore an issue in the news. Topics have included like, should children be allowed on social media? Should junk food adverts be banned? Should we spend money on space exploration? And perhaps most relevant at the moment, is voting important? There's just been so many elections that are happening in the world in 2024, both in the UK and abroad. Now, if you have 15 minutes and you want to put 15 minutes to discuss the news, you may want to pick out from the pack our 60-second reads. These are short summaries of the story that are accompanied by Twinkl's with comprehension questions that have an image of Twinkl's reading dogs next to them. Each dog represents a different reading skill that children are employing when answering the question. So, for example, question 1 is we've got Rex Retrieval, who does, as the name suggests, retrieval, and we've also got the dogs there for summarizing and inference. Once children are familiar with the story, answer the questions, you may want then to introduce the big question, and we've got a discussion prompt there that children can use to help structure their answers in response to the question. And once they've already rehearsed it through discussion, you may want to get them to write down their opinion as a paragraph, and we include this "What's your opinion" sheet within the weekly pack. If you have longer, so double the time, 30 minutes, you may want to use a PowerPoint to introduce the story to the children, then go into discussing it using the discussion prompt to help children structure their answers. We've also included a for and against. This might be something you use, say, if children, when they're discussing, they jot down, maybe if they're for the idea, they're like arguments, but through listening to a peer, they might hear counter arguments that they can jot down as well, before then writing up their opinion on this "What's your opinion" sheet. If you have 60 minutes, perhaps even longer, you may want to use the display image that's included within the pack, or moving on to the newspaper style article that's included. There's then the debate there's then like a bit of oral debate that you can use here, which I mentioned with the for and against seat and the discussion prompt. And then finally, the what's your opinion seat to write up their answers. Lastly, we also include a pack, lastly, there is also a task sheet that includes extension activities, so children want to go further. Brilliant way for practicing like active citizenship, whether it's writing letters, practice those written skills, or researching and investigating more about a topic. So these packs are available every Wednesday on the Twinkl Newsroom site, and that's www.twinkl.co.uk/newsroom. So the next section looks at how you can integrate current affairs within reading, and I've included 2 quotes about reading for pleasure. The child news-friendly article may be one way of helping children, broadening that choice. So we know that, the Child National Literacy Trust say that just 2 in 5 children and young people aged 8 to 18 said they enjoyed reading in their free time in 2023. And this is the lowest level since we first asked the question, the National Literacy Trust first asked the question in 2005. And then a group of academics said that an important factor in developing reading for pleasure is choice, and choice and interest are highly related. So while you can't force the child to enjoy reading, offering them that choice, that broad range of genres, can be a way of stimulating reading for pleasure. And why not, in that broad range of genres, include a child-friendly news article? And again, when looking at the effects of reading for pleasure, we can see that these studies have found that it enables them to have a better understanding of other cultures, community participation, and a greater insight into human nature and decision making. And the reading framework also says how time and book club might also be set aside for pupils to read with a partner, reading a non-fiction book, a comic, or a children's newspaper together. So child-friendly news, a newspaper-style report, is a great way of broadening children's genres. You may want to print out an article and put it in your reading area, or you might even want to use it for your book club as a way of going through, as a way of saying as a way of talking to children about what they liked about the article, what they learnt, and engendering interest like that. Now, there are of course ways in which reading a child-friendly news article can help meet national curriculum objectives. I've included some example ones here for the Year 5 and Year 6 reading comprehension programme of study. So it could be distinguishing between statements of fact and opinion, retrieving, recording and presenting information from non-fiction, identifying the main ideas drawn from more than one paragraph, or discussing and evaluating how authors use language, including figurative language, and considering the impact on the reader. So if we return to the example of Mudeng and see how we can pull out these objectives. So we've got the article here. Now, clearly with non-fiction, retrieval is a popular skill to practice. Games such as fastest finger first might be something you may want to include. So in this instance, you may want to find you might want to get someone to find 2 organizations that have used Mudeng to promote themselves. So just looking down here, we've got how the German football team, Bayern Munich, have done that, and also the US basketball team, the US Jazz. Up next, we've got some facts. We might want to look at opinions, take it, and which kind of connect with language as well. While our content writers strive to be as impartial as they can, there are certain words that betray their opinions. So, for example, we've got here that Mudeng is a phenomenon and a fan favorite. You may want to get children to, you may want to explore those words, explore those words. Going on for authorial intent, you may want to pick out the word adorable in there and look at that whole paragraph, those 2 paragraphs that begin from the zoo began sharing photos and videos of the adorable hippo on social media, and she quickly became a viral phenomenon. Mudang has become such a fan favorite that the zoo claims visitor numbers have doubled. Now, in that paragraph, we've got those phrases: adorable, phenomenon, a fan favorite. One thing you might want to get children to do is explore, is consider, well, if the writer was not a fan of Mudang, they did not agree in the, they found it completely ridiculous that people would be interested in a hippo. How would the adjectives be different? And maybe get children to explore that role of authorial intent in the news. And also, there's lots of ways that children can practice the skill of summarizing, like news articles in particular. Often, as in this article, the first sentence will be a summary answering the 5 W's of what's been going on. And included in that is the headline as well. So you may want to get children to consider how they could write a different headline, how they could summarize that information in a different way in the form of a headline. So there's lots of different reading skills you can pick out with the news that are more than just say retrieval. That's an example of one of our news articles that you may want to use as part of, like, say, a guided reading session, or you may want to use it as your book club within a book club, as I mentioned previously. So we've touched now on oracy and the reading and the role that the news could play in helping children develop skills. The next one I'd like to think of is how can we build critical thinking? Now, this goes into like the area of, say, like misinformation, like how can we get children to think critically about the different sources of information they see. And this is an issue that educationalists recognise as something that we're going to have to grapple with in the future. So the OCR said in a recent report that was published in September that there are 2 glaring omissions from the current curriculum: climate change education and digital literacy. Written from a slightly different tack, the NSPCC said that what a young person sees online can shape how they view the world and impact their overall well-being. It's important to talk to them about how misinformation spreads and how to look out for it. From the same report I mentioned earlier, the Commission on Fake News, published in 2018, they found that only 2% of children and young people in the UK have the critical literacy skills they need to tell if a news story is real or fake. And almost 2/3 of teachers believe fake news is harming children's well-being by increasing levels of anxiety, damaging their self-esteem, and skewing their worldview. I just want to give a shout out here for the Association for Citizenship Teaching. They include a lot of really useful stuff to help teachers. This is just a quote that I found from one of their publications, and it said how that disinformation is popular. Research on Twitter showed that false news stories are 70% more likely to be retweeted than true ones. So again, we're all pointing to that need for children to develop the critical thinking about from the information sources that they're exposed to. And the curriculum offers examples of offers some objectives of how we can achieve this. The PSHE curriculum, the PSHE Association curriculum, says that children should learn how to assess the reliability of sources of information online and how to make safe, reliable choices from search results. They also go on to say how children should learn about how text and images in the media and on social media can be manipulated or invented, and learn strategies to evaluate the reliability of sources and identify misinformation. I've included here a line from the history curriculum because I just wanted to show how actually critical thinking is something that crosses all sorts of avenues within the curriculum, particularly when looking at, like, I come from a history background myself, so clearly, when you look at topics in the Key Stage 2 curriculum, there's lots of thinking around, say, like, well, how did we know about why the Romans invaded Britain, but how might this have been seen from the Celt perspective? So that ability to see other points of view. And the Key Stage 2 computing curriculum says that children should use search technologies effectively, appreciate how results are selected and ranked, and be discerning in evaluating digital content. So I included a lot of information there. How might this work, say, in a worked example? So at Newsroom, we produce some fake news quizzes that unpack different aspects of news, and the aim of these is to get children to think, to help children develop those critical thinking skills. So you might want to start with a context. You might want to take something that's not related to the news, but start with a context that's familiar with children. So you might want to begin with, so here is an example from a resource we did on bias, and the context will be familiar with children. Of course, it's the story of the 3 little pigs. And you might want to get them to first of all think about the author. So what might this character's personal opinion be? So how might they write it compared to someone else in the story? So after that, you may want to unpack the language for children. So that the pigs here would have been described as local, but the wolf is visiting. How do you think this might influence the readers? So what is this leading us to think? And again, the headline plays a critical role in this. So how the pigs are praised for their bravery and cleverness, like what might the wolf say by contrast? And again, this quote, so we showed him, said one of the plucky pigs, adding, he'll never be seen again. Did the author use this quote because it adds balance or because it supports their own opinion? Things that you may want to explore with kids, the way that they've used this quote, is it fair that they've not included a quote from the wolf in the example? In the example here. By contrast, we've also got this example that looks at how the wolf saw the story. So again, children are getting exposed to those different ways of seeing the news, those different perspectives, and the role of bias plays. So if we look here, so are his feelings about the events or the little pigs causing him to use powerful adjectives or even rude language? So talks about the 3 evil pigs. Well, would the pigs have seen it that way? And the 3, also there's a line here about, the 3 little thugs. Again, just looking at the author in general, we could probably could children predict what his opinion might be compared to those of the article on the pigs? And could he have a bias against little pigs, which is causing him to write an unbalanced article? So again, that use of language and how it differs from the story from the pig that the pig reporter wrote. And did the author use this quote because it tells the whole story or because it supports their own opinion of the event? So the brave wolf told us exclusively that he thought they were playing a game, but then the pigs got nasty and took it too far. So again, we see there's 2, we've got examples of bias here that you might want to unpack, that gives an example of what that looks like for children, but what that looks like for children can unpack that issue more. Looking again at the idea of critical thinking, Newsroom also releases some articles where we take maybe 2 kind of out there stories, for want of a better phrase, and then one false story, and we get children to read through this worksheet, gets children to read through the stories and guess which one is the untrue story. It's about getting children to think critically about what makes something a reliable source of information. So the questions they may want to ask is, how old is the source of information? Who's saying it? Is it bad writing? So by bad writing, we're meaning, if there's typos or errors like that. It might point to bad editing, which is not a good sign of, this is not a good sign, which might betray that it's unreliable. And are the facts checkable? So if we've got things that we can check in the article to see if it's reliable and if it's mentioned on other reliable news sites as well. So at first glance, this article looks a bit suspicious. It's about the snail racing championships that took place recently in King's Lynn. First example is, I'm thinking, well, why would anyone want to do a snail racing championship? But then I guess in the other head, I guess being an adult, I'm probably thinking, well, maybe only in Britain would we have such a tournament. So we can take these, we can see from the article that it's got some facts that we can verify. It's written in a reasonably unbiased way. There's nothing that betrays an opinion. By first glance, there's not bad writing. One dubious thing might be the age. We've not got a date on the article, so that might not be it might not be helpful, but we have got checkable facts, and you may then want to go and check these on other reliable news sources to see if the story appears and whether these facts can be verified. And indeed, there is such a thing as the World Snail Racing Championships that do take place in Norfolk. Just yeah, I love that snail with his number on the back. The Twinkl Newsroom provides a range of fake news quizzes. You may want to use these to support learning within PSHE or as part of your Internet Safety Day, or these articles here. You may want to use just as perhaps an early morning task, or as an addition, as as something for quiet reading for children to practice and thinking through developing those critical thinking tasks. The quizzes explore an issue related to fake news, whether that's bias, finding reliable sources, misinformation and disinformation. They then go through a worked example. So the example of the story of the pigs I showed you came in the bias PowerPoint, and then there's a quiz in which children can apply what they have learnt, and these are available on the newsroom site. Unlike the weekly pack, there's no set date for these coming out, so they're there for you to access should you wish. And in the links in the resource sheet for this presentation, I've given you links to some of the quizzes. So yeah, that kind of wraps up from me what I was going to say. I'd like to before I hand back to Helen, I just want to say I hope you found today's sessions useful. It's maybe given you some ideas, some new confidence when talking about the news. And yeah, I just want to say a big thank you on my behalf for coming tonight. And yeah, all that remains for me to say thank you. I'll now hand back to Helen.